Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the KB Ear Inc. and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank KeepHifi for providing the KB Ear Inc. for a review. Do greatly appreciate it. KeepHifi, you rock. Alright, so the KB Ear Inc. This is available on KeepHifi for $70. It has a 8.8 millimeter dynamic driver inside, 16 ohms of impedance, 102 decibels of sensitivity, a frequency response of 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Very simple unboxing. You get some specs on the back side and just a little bit of branding, slide it off. You get a very nice box underneath. We're not going to show you the insides as everything is just laid out very simple. What is included in the box? You get a little cleaning tool. You also get a cleaning cloth. Mine is this canary type of yellow. And then you get the very typical carry case made of leather, little magnetic connector. You also get a ton of tips. You're going to get 8 different pairs of tips. First ones are these shallow wide bore, and then you're going to get your standard olive. The wide bore ones you get small, medium, and large, and then of the olive shaped ones you get small, medium, large, extra large, and extra small. I actually used the extra small of the olive shape. You also get a cable, and if you start with the connection and go all the way up to split, it's a very nice cable. 8-core Litz OFC silver plated. And then you go from the split up, it's not so nice of a cable. The material itself of the cable is nice. Ear hooks are way too stiff and just hard, not very pleasant. And then you have 2-pin, and the 2 pins are metal casings, color coded, which is nice. But the problem is they're metal and they're a little clunky and huge, and they just put pressure on the front of my ears, and it was just not a very comfortable cable for me to use. The inks themselves. Now the cable of choice for me is the drop 2-pin cable. I just find it to be a lot smaller where I had pain where the connection went. And also it's just thinner, lighter, not quite as thick. Very nice cable, works very well with the K-Bear ink. As you can see, I have the olive shaped tips on, red stemmed. They're small, and they have a slight difference in tuning than the wide bore. We'll discuss that in a little bit. The ink are very nicely built. It's got an alloy shell. It's got this kind of uniqueness on the outside on the faceplate, kind of like a honeycomb type of design. It's really hard to see on camera, and then a little bit of branding. They have a very flat back to the shell, a decent angle, not the longest of nozzles, but it's okay. So I find that the fit is very finicky. They go into ears, and I wasn't able to insert them all the way and get them more snug using the stock cable. They just didn't quite insert far enough, and I found that they were very wobbly, and that the cable, because of those aggressive ear hooks, were trying to pull the shell out. And so I found that the 2-pin cable from drop, a lot smaller right here, so it fit better, and I was able to insert it a little bit farther, especially using the small tips. And then because the ear hooks are not as aggressive, they did stay in the ears a lot more snugly. I do wish that K-Bear had added in a small wing right here, just a very subtle one, something to kind of fit a little bit better in the ear. These do have a little bit of heft to them so that they, they're just a finicky fit. Once you get them in place, they're okay, but it's a kind of a trial and error adjustment, and I really had to play around with tips to be able to get them in, fit them, get the proper seal, and then be able to, you know, play music and enjoy it. Isolation of outside noises is okay. These are not very good. They're probably somewhere about the 50% range at best. You are going to hear outside noises. You're going to be able to carry on conversations. Once the music starts, it disappears, but it's just not a very, very isolating of outside noises type of IEM. Okay, so I mentioned the tips. So a few differences in the tips. The wide bore tip gives a more open type of sound, adds in a little bit of air, a little bit better separation of sound, but what it does is it accentuates and really elevates the mids and treble, the upper mids that is, and the treble regions. They become a little harsh. You get a lot of moments of sibilance, and you get harsh hotness in the treble. And so they just are not a very pleasing sound with the wide bore. I found that they were very fatiguing even at lower volumes. Also, the bass was not very impactful. Putting in the olive-shaped tip, I found that the olive-shaped tips brought in the bass and added in a little bit of just control and a little bit more tightness in the bass, and you got some more impact. And then in the upper mids and in the treble, it was controlled, it was tamed slightly, and did not have as many moments of sibilance and hotness and harshness. Even though you did lose some of the openness and airiness to the presentation, I found that the olive-shaped tips are just the more pleasurable listen for my ears. I found that the K-Bear Inc. is very picky with sources. It is just very painful, I guess would be the word to use, with cold analytical sources. And I found that if you put it with a little bit warmer sources, it became muddled and thick and just didn't sound very pleasing and was a little bit, ugh. So it's kind of picky. I found that it really sounded best with a neutral, natural source. My favorite source to use it with were DAPs, and I found that the Periodic Audio Rhodium and also the Razer DAC amp dongle were the best sounding. If you went with something like a Lav Audio DS100, it was way too cold, way too analytical, and it was shredding my ears. Things like the NextDrive Spectra X, X Duo, Link V2 sounded okay, but it was just kind of meh. It just really didn't do anything for me. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it either. I could tolerate it, but it wasn't a preference. As I said, Periodic Audio Rhodium and the Razer DAC amp were my favorites. It was okay on desktops, and it was okay on DAPs. Again, hit or miss, depending on whether it was a warm or cold source. So the K-Bear Inc. is very source picky. Genres of music, it's also very picky. I found that it sounded the best with metal, classical rock, prog rock, regular rock, and then progressive jazz, progressive electronic, classical, and also EDM and just electronic based music. It was okay with original jazz, original classical styles, blues, R&B, and it was not so good with oldies, pop, dance, K-pop, J-pop, and it was very, very ear-shredding with badly mastered tracks, or very upper mids, treble focused tracks. It was ear shredding, fatiguing, no matter the volume levels. Okay, how do the K-Bear or KB ear Inc. sound? They are a extreme V shape. Bass, upper mids, and treble prominent. The bass of the KB ear Inc. It's fun. It's got a lot to it, and it can be very domineering, very dominant, depending on the track. It has a lot of punch to it. It has good slam to it. It has good impact. There's nice sub-bass rumble and grumble. And it has a good amount of just to it. But when it comes to detail retrieval and resolution, it's all right. It's not the greatest. You're not going to win some awards here with the K-Bear Inc. when it comes to bass detail and resolution, but you're also not going to be lacking any. It does give you everything that you need, and it reveals it, and it resolves it fine. Tone and timbre are okay. This is not a nitpicky, I'm going to decipher every single little nuance of the music earphone here. This is a fun bass head earphone. It has a lot of girth and a lot of power and slam and impact to the bass, not a lot of the finer elements. Mids we'll come back to. Treble. All right, starting with the lower treble, 6 to 8K presence region, and then 8K and beyond. It is elevated. If you are sensitive to treble, stay shy away from the K-Bear Inc. The K-Bear Inc. are elevated there, and they have a somewhat aggressive approach to it. There is a lot of sparkle, a lot of energy, and at times it is too excessive. It is very expressive, and you can kind of tame it by changing tips and with sources, but it is always expressive. Detail retrieval resolution is okay. It's like the bass. You're not going to set any records here, but at the same time, you're not going to be disappointed. And then with tone and timbre, just like the bass, it's okay. It's not anything special, but again, it does what it's supposed to. Mids. The mids are recessed. They are definitely behind the bass and the treble. But they have a good body to them. They have a nice enough weight and note, and it has enough density to it where they don't feel thin. They don't sound artificial, but at the same time, they're not the focal point. If you are a lover of vocals and of mids, shy away from the K-Bear Inc. But if you like to have enough clarity and enough to be able to hear the vocalists and hear the instruments, and to be able to follow along with the melodies of the music, then the K-Bear Inc. may be something to enjoy. It does an adequate job of allowing you to hear all that's going on, but doesn't do a good job of really presenting it. Everything just sounds okay. The mids are kind of in their emotion. There's not really a whole lot of energy. They're just kind of along for the ride. All the energy and the emotion comes from the bass and the treble. But overall, I find that the mids are pleasant. They are uneven though. As things go through, you definitely have a more recession towards the backer end of the mids. The upper mids definitely are elevated and more forward and more aggressive. Overall, I find that the frequency response of the KB Inc. is V-shaped and most definitely tuned for certain genres of music. They are very, very much a fun sounding IEM. Soundstage. Soundstage of the K-Bear Inc. is not really anything to write home about. It's okay. It's not super wide, even with the wide bore tips. but with the wide bore tips, you do get slightly more soundstage. It has decent depth and enough layering to keep the music flowing without sounding muddled and confused, unless you're using a super warm source. I found that the soundstage was okay on the K-Bear Inc. Nothing too exciting, but nothing that's going, "Ugh, this is terrible." I didn't mind it. The overall imaging of the ink is competent. It's kind of in between it's in the neighborhood and it's right there. It's kind of almost kind of. And then as far as the overall tone and timbre of the K-Bear ink, like, we're not going natural here, but yet we're also not going unnatural. Things have an okay tonality to them, but they're not anything super great or super bad. They're just okay. Timbre is enough to be able to differentiate between instruments and vocalists, but again, you're not setting world records with the K-Bear ink. Detail retrieval and resolution is fine by the price point, and it's okay, but it's not, again, setting the world on fire with the K-Bear ink. So, do I like the K-Bear ink? Yeah, for certain genres. Do I hate the K-Bear ink for? Yeah, on certain genres. Sometimes K-Bear inks sound insanely good, and then other times you're like, ugh, skip. Oh, I like this song. So it's a finicky, picky IEM that works great with some libraries, and some libraries it's just like, get away. Don't even play that music on this. How does it compare to some of its rivals in the price point? Well, you have the Dunu Titan S. Now, the Dunu Titan S, very much the mids focus IEM. You're going to get a lot better body, a lot more centered vocals, a lot better instrumentation, presentation, and everything is just going to sound more natural and accurate. It has better tone and timbre. Doesn't have the bass impact of the K-Bear ink, but it is more controlled, more defined, does a better job with detail retrieval and resolution, and has a more accurate and true soundstage. Moving on to the KB Ear Tri Meteor. Now, the Tri Meteor is $100, so it is more expensive than the K-Bear ink, but I find that the Meteor is just a more pleasing bass head IEM. I find that the Meteor has better control throughout, is more balanced and cohesive, is not as recessed in the mids, and has a more pleasant approach in the upper mids and in the treble. But it is more laid back. So depending on what your preference is when it comes to the genres of music and when it comes to your overall presentation that you're looking for in your bass head music, you may like the K-Bear ink better than the Meteor. Personally, for me, I prefer things to be a little bit more mellow and a little bit more natural sounding, which I find that the Meteor has, especially in tone and timbre, and that I prefer that one over the ink. But again, the ink is not a bad IEM. It's different. It has moments of just like, wow, this thing's cool. And then it has moments of, So, do I recommend the K-Bear ink? Yeah, actually, I do. If you like certain types of music, metal, prog rock, classic rock, EDM, electronic, classical, progressive jazz, and you're not super picky when it comes to listening to original jazz and classical, blues, and R&B. But if you're into oldies, pop, dance, K-pop, J-pop, those types of music, I don't think the K-Bear ink will be for you. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on screen, subscription links, notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. And then don't forget to give a thumbs up, or a thumbs down to the video. Also, check out the links down below. There's all kinds of information regarding gear recommendations, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things like how you can connect with the channel, follow the channel, support the channel. All kinds of good stuff are listed down below. And don't forget to enjoy the music and that honesty is the best policy.